Greetings. Welcome to True Health Live. We're back for episode 2, season 2, the truth about mental health stigma. So we're going to be talking about that today. But we've kind of switched it up for how we move now. And we, want to check in with one another, especially like this being about mental health. Like we're a month late for Mental Health Awareness Month, but that's okay because talking about mental health is important, and no matter what time of the year it is. So, just checking in and want to know about, what's happening in the world today. So, today's topic is about mental health stigma. So it's like, what's happening when it comes to mental health? And so like, how are we faring when it comes to mental health and COVID? How has that affected people? We've been dealing with this for 2 years now, a little over 2 years. So what has that done to people? We kind of touched on a little bit of this. Greetings, precious Stephanie. Good thanks, good thanks. We wish you were here too. But that's okay. You're going to get different iterations of us in True Health Live, and it's going to be, we're mixing it up. That's the whole goal, mixing it up. But like I was saying, what has that done to us over these past 2.5 years? Like, how have we shifted? How have we changed, for better or for worse? We have been sitting on screens for 2 years. A lot of people have picked up and relocated. We've discussed the Great Resignation because, people are really thinking about their physical, mental, and spiritual health, and that all, touches into one another. So, it's important to always kind of just touch base and think about these things. And as you know, so the True Health Live podcast is a live broadcast, and the recordings are uploaded to major podcasting platforms. So you can definitely check that out. We'll make sure to put the link in the description below. So yeah, COVID and mental health. And there's not to mention how many mass shootings were there over these past 3 weeks, insane. And a lot of some questions I know that come up, people are gonna get off because they're gonna claim mental illness, mental insanity. And there's some fact checking that has to be done with that. That's not always the case. And the truth is, if anyone, makes that claim, and it's successful, I'm going to have a whole bunch of bells dinging and stuff. If anyone makes that claim and it's successful, most likely it always, and there's an acquittal, I should say, not successful, excuse me, but if there's an acquittal, most likely it does end up with being committed to a psychiatric institution. So there's not okay, I did this horrible thing and then I walk off free. No, there's definitely something that follows. There's some action that follows to address that, that you claim that you have mental illness. But we know that's not the breadth of mental illness and the breadth of mental illness and mental health stigma. So yeah, I wanted to just kind of talk about that. I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
Worries. I think this topic. Do you hear me clearly? I hear feedback. Okay. I think this topic is so important for us to have, especially in our communities, especially during the time of the pandemic, COVID. We're technically in that era. You're going to have things come up even more so as the summer comes around. There's going to be issues. But I think us in the house really having to focus on self, but also doing all things because life kept going no matter what stage we were at. Allowed people to really focus more in the midst of doing what they needed to do, had to do what they have to do for themselves. And I do apologize. I hear a very bad feedback.
I don't hear feedback, but you sound a little muffled. It's something covering the mic. But but there is an echo. So they're saying there is an echo in there. So how about I'm gonna do this?
Is that better? Can you hear me? All right, great. Okay, so I was saying, during this time of COVID, we had to stay home and do what we needed to do for ourselves and then also for those around us. It gave us time to really think through things. But some of us were able to navigate that space better than others. Unfortunately, we did see a lot of mental health issues come up. Folks who probably didn't face their mental and emotional health issues prior were now forced to do that because all we had was time and alone time and space and all that stuff, to really hone in on what was happening, how we were feeling, how we were dealing with things, rather be professionally or personally. Some people weren't able to navigate that in a healthy way. And so that's why we saw the height of all the violence, and homelessness and all of these things. I'm here in New York. And so we saw quite a bit, like on the train with the homeless population, with our elderly, with our youth, especially. It got to a point where everyone was just sick and tired of being inside and just being captivated in the four walls or wherever they were at. They just wanted to come out and engage and interact. And Zoom can only do but so much. The phone, what is it? FaceTime can only do but so much. That in person touch or in person um, engagement really does play a big part in our social lives. And that being gone, I just think elevated a lot of things within society and within our communities.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, I think the pressure of like being stuck inside got to a lot of people. I also think that we were forced to look at the prevalence of mental health, mental illness, right, and social and behavioral health, and understand that sometimes it can be very subtle. And maybe there's more people who suffer from different aspects of mental health issues and mental health disorders than we actually realize. Even with ourselves, how were we affected? Like, you know, you get you get like used to moving on this autopilot, and then when that autopilot is forced to stop and you actually have to sit with self and your own thoughts, it's like, what's happening in that moment? How are you checking in? Did you even have the skills to check in with yourself and know like what's happening? And I think that's also a part of mental health, whether there's been a diagnosis or not. So some of it is also checking in with ourselves to make sure that we're able to cope, with different happenings and different things. I'm going to take a second to just acknowledge the chat. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Greetings, Chief Yuya. And they're saying that's better. So I think it was maybe I needed to mute out a little bit. Greetings, Master Menulek. Greetings. Greetings, Akuya Bisa. Precious Stephanie says that's so true. Human interaction and engagement is a huge part of mental health maintenance. Yeah, and people were missing one another. So many conversations I've been on where teams are trying to figure out ways to go back into the office, because that sitting and engaging just on a screen, like how long have we just been engaging on a screen in this? We haven't seen one another physically in so long, and that can be such a downer. And so some people, with great resignation and all, there are still some people who are like itching to get back into workspaces, or not necessarily just workspaces, or just doing things where they're engaging with other people. I know for me, I enjoy dance, and so when I was able to, like, few times last summer, like during when there was a lull, I think this was like pre Delta and all the subsequent variants, I was able to take with my sister, take a dance class. Like, I think we did it 3 times in person. It was so like gratifying, like just being outside and being like in physical space with other people, and also doing something that was like spiritually and physically uplifting, and just movement was so amazing. I can't even describe it. But it was great to be in space, and just be outside. So yeah.
No, that reminds me of like when you're on the treadmill indoors. It's not the same experience as going outside for a walk, right? It's so much more. It's like refreshing. Your energy levels go up. You're more motivated. It's you're feeding your soul. So I think like it's a pro and a con. I think us being home allowed us to just sit still and really hone in on ourselves and what we need to do for ourselves emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And then on the other side, it's also, but I do have to step out. I have to, get some fresh air, let the sun hit my skin, because that too helps, helps pull you out of like a depression, or if you're feeling down and out, all those little things matter. And what I've learned about myself is that I like that hybrid option. So I love to be home. I love to save money. Who does not, right? Who doesn't like to save money? And I like having full control over my time and how I work when I work. And we tend to know when we are at the height, like right at the peak, where okay, this hour is my best time to work and be creative and so on and so forth. But then going into an office to collaborate, and or even if it's not an office, but just the space to collaborate with colleagues, I think works out well too, because there's sometimes that I need to get things done fast, and Zoom is not good enough, texting ain't good enough, all the instant messages, it doesn't get, it's, to me, slows things down. So having a hybrid choice was very well, because it worked very well, because it allowed me to operate in a space that made me really comfortable and really helped me have control over the work and the time I dedicated to things. But then being able to connect with colleagues was awesome, because it was like, this just is a quick question and answer in person. Whereas if I had to send an email or whatnot, there were so many delays. And then just having that genuine, hey, how you doing? How, let's grab lunch, catch up, things like that. I think all of that goes into our overall well-being as well, because it's not strictly just about work. It's about, like I said, like we both said it before, engaging and having authentic conversations and connections, so we can continue to to feed every part of ourselves, right? Because it doesn't have to always be work, it could be play as well. But again, it allows us to grow, it allows us to take away all the worries and all the things that are, that might be bringing us down a little, like our feelings or however we operate day to day. Just that, you know just that interaction makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's key to like take into account what's happening up top, the mental, right? The mind. Because, how many times do we, and this comes from a text that I read and try to make sure that I touch at least, and lay eyes upon and read and take something in every day called the Anu Way. And it's, a tone that I follow, of course, along with scripture. And it talks about like those mental meanderings, right? Like, where do we allow our mind to go? And what we allow to seep in, that noise that has to be shut. I'm paraphrasing, that noise that has to be shut off. We have to be, mindful of ways that we allow our minds to just kind of go off, and then when we leave that door open, what's allowed to come in, right?
Absolutely. Because with everything happening now, every time I think we touched on this last time, you turn on the television, you go to social media, it's all these horrendous things taking place. And so you do really have to be cognizant and conscious of what you're taking in. It's great to be well informed, but be well aware of what's happening, without taking in all of that, the emotional grief of it. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard not to feel, right, for your fellow brother, sister, just the human. But we have to understand that take it like making it ours is not going to change, right? It's not going to change anything. What's going to change anything is us going out there and making a difference. It's like through policy change, through the work that we're doing, having these candid conversations, because we all know mental health and emotional health isn't a conversation we normally have in our communities. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to bring it up. I'll use myself as an example. I do believe in my family that there are mental and emotional health issues, but no one has ever talked about it
Mm-hmm.
until my generation. And
Yeah.
so, how I raise my daughter is very different than how my parents raised me, how my mom talked to me, and so on and so forth. Our
Mm-hmm.
engagement is a lot different, right? So, I want to make sure that she is emotionally tended to, and that she understands that the power of communication and understanding, and that, it's okay to let your feelings out. It's okay to, if your every day is not sunshine and roses, right? But help
Yeah.
navigate that because she understands it, she practices a healthy way of coping through life, life changes, she's a stranger. But then that will replicate into how she moves in this world as an individual, later on as a partner, as a parent, so on and so forth. And she has friends. So that can roll off to the friends as well, and she learns how to
Yeah.
navigate relationships.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that pulls us right into like talking about like the stigma, like you talked about, family and people being understanding. And so, the first thing is like, if we're gonna have a conversation on this topic, it's like we need to know like what the words mean. That's, what is stigma, right? Because we use words all the time, but then it's like, do we really understand what they mean, right? And I didn't get a chance to like, honestly, I was like, I didn't get a chance to dig into it as much as I want because I know, if we're gonna look into it, it's like, where does it come from? What's the root? So we do have people in the chat. So like, if you can like look up the root, but I'm gonna give like the blanket general definition of stigma being, negative attitudes of discrimination, on certain people, persons, or individuals based on distinguished characteristics that are just, discriminated against or not liked by the public, and so it's like a blanket negative opinion. And when it comes to mental health, it's negative attitudes or disapproval or shame put on people who live with mental illness or seek help for emotional distress, right? So like, how many times have you been like, you're talking to somebody, you're seeing somebody, and we have all of these, we have a day for every day. There's something that's being celebrated every day. And there's a whole month, for mental health awareness, but these things still happen. Like, and they happen, there's different causes for it. There's the social piece of it, the social stigma, the social stigmatizing, and then there's the self-stigmatizing. So like the self-stigmatizing is, sometimes a direct result of the social, and that's like that internalization of the negative stereotypes that are kind of heaped upon you. And that social stigmatization, it comes from different elements like lack of knowledge or awareness. So like basically ignorance of, a particular mental health issue. And there's plenty, that we can pull from: anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a big one. There's been people overseas, fighting for, at this point, some of us are like, what is it now? And they come back, they return home. And if they've seen active duty, there's all sorts of issues that they're dealing with and not necessarily always able to get the help that they need. And so what happens is, then they're left to these elements, right, of social stigmatization, like, people not understanding what their issue is because maybe they've internalized what they have, and it's like, well, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to be looked at differently. But then when, maybe something happens, maybe something is said, people are like, there's that ignorance, there's that level of ignorance. So, and I could go on and on and on, but I will, pause for you to like share, some of that, what you think and your thoughts on that. And then I'll go to the chat.
Oh yeah, no, oh, you have to mute. I saw someone said that it's on my side when Deidre's unmuted. So thank you guys for that. No, I completely agree. You know what? I wanted to say as you were talking to, I noticed as I've gotten older, like these conversations about mental health and emotional health. Back in the days, like we weren't having them, right? Because no one had it with us. So as you're growing, no one is talking about it. Your friends aren't, and I had older friends as well. Now I have those very same friends, but that we're because we're all older. I have even my male friends calling me like, "Hey, do you know of a therapist or someone I can talk to and whatnot?" And I think that is so powerful because it shows our growth. It shows that we're doing the independent work, acknowledging that these things are here, and that through life we're gonna bump into different scenarios. We're gonna experience different things, and we're going to get triggered for whatever reason, right? Because we all have layers that we need to peel back, and with self-discovery and rediscovering and things of that nature. But I love to see when we are at a point of not only having the conversation and identifying mental health and emotional health issues, but when we're asking for help. Like, I've tried, but I couldn't get here, I couldn't find the kind of person I want to, or the provider I want to. can you help me? And not being afraid to ask for help or feeling ashamed or any type of way, no matter what society thinks, right? Or what the other person thinks or another family member thinks. Just being having the courage and being brave enough to say, you know what, I think I need to talk to someone outside of my circle, right? So I think that's a powerful thing, and that's a message that we want to share with our youth and also our peers too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, the part about sharing outside of yourself or outside of like your circle is so key, because a lot of the times like we fail to recognize like, well, many times like our circle's doing the same thing we're doing, right? Or if it's sharing outside of your circle, it's okay to do that, because maybe if you're thinking that, you know, there will be some sort of like stigmatization if you share inside your circle, feel safe enough to like go and find that help elsewhere, you know, wherever you need it, because that's that first step to, you know, not getting locked into that internalization, that self stigma, and being able to say, like you said, like I need help, and I need you to help me figure out where to go to get it. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm gonna go to the chat really quick. So Menelik says, very true. Authentic interactions in person are crucial. Trying to rationalize being isolated can only work for so long. After a while, the cabin fever is real. Like it's like FOMO on steroids. Like what is happening outside? You know, I need to get outside. I had this joke with like a few friends in high school, and we used to like dream about getting outside, and we had this assignment where we had to make up our own periodical table of elements, and one of the elements was outsidium. We were just like daydreaming of being outside. It is real. Like being just getting out is real, you know, and the locations and where we have those human interactions matter. They matter. They really make a difference. Um, Akua Visa says, I've found that there are many nurses who haven't taken the time to acknowledge the mental and emotional toll COVID has taken on them. I've created a space for discussion, and the outpour is amazing. That's amazing. Yeah.
That is,
That is
I want to chime in on that. I think that is amazing. I give you hugs and kisses virtually, because so often in healthcare, even providers that are just like bypassing that, especially with Black and African American people, people of color, and folks are getting lost in the system because no one's taking the time to address it. And the fact that there are nurses who are, because nurses are our first point of contact, right? Before you even see a doctor, you're gonna see a nurse. So I love to hear that the nurses are taking the initiative, because you're meeting with the patients, and there's then we have nurse navigators, we have patient navigators who are taking the time to do that. And so it's awesome that you have created a safe space for patients to communicate, because there's always a piece in a patient's care that, you know, mental health should come up. There should be some sort of screening. Sometimes people can't even identify when there is a issue or there's something to work through. But if you take the proper steps and implement a system where you can have these conversations or do like a little survey, you can figure it out with the patient and together work on a treatment plan, or just a plan to help them navigate and help them transition to maybe a specialist, a therapist, or whatnot. So I commend you, and I'm happy to hear that. And there's another part I'll comment when you read when you get to that one. You're still muted.
I was laba laba. I was saying Akuya is also a nurse, and she's a case manager, you know. So for those of you who are watching and listening, definitely like look out for her. I would say go to the video, you know, because you won't be able to see it on a podcast because it's audio. So you can definitely check out. I'll put her information below if you want to contact her, because she's awesome at it. And we'll put it in the description box, so you can just come on over and subscribe to True Health Live on YouTube, and her information will be there. Dr. Gertrude, welcome. She says stigma meaning mark or brand, right? And so, but give thanks for that. Somebody was listening and did the homework. It's a mark or brand, and that's exactly what we do when we label someone. That's a mark or a brand. When we're saying, oh well, they have this, so we'll chalk it up as this or that or the other, but without like actually looking into. And we have a surprise. So Precious Stephanie, she is back. She actually had a board meeting, so she's able to join us. So I'm going to add her to the stream to, contribute to this great discussion. Peace, Precious, how are you?
Peace. Great. I'm great. Good evening, everyone. How could I not be here? And it was mental health, mental health awareness. So thank you. I thought the discussion was really, really great. So I'm happy to be able to join.
Good. Before we go back to like our discussion, I want to like kind of go back over to the chat. Peace Anu Radio. Akua says, while nurses care for others who are mentally ill, there are some who don't speak or care for their own. To include myself, I had to learn to tend to myself. That is such a powerful share. Is that the comment you were talking about?
That and the
And
others.
the next one. And she says, it's hard sometimes to get the help needed in the mental health arena. It sometimes takes 2 or 3 therapists before finding a good fit. Oh, interesting. Thanks for that share.
I just want to say, yes, it's great. We talk about mental health, we advise on it, and quite often we always give good advice. It's like being in a relationship. You give good advice to everybody else, but you don't take it for yourself. So when we're talking about self care and self love and things of that nature, and focusing on our mental health, we can help and guide folks and give them our advice and help them navigate through many systems. And sometimes it is hard for us to focus because we're so focused on everyone else that we kind of neglect ourselves. But it's important. It is so important that we circle back to us, because we are no good to anyone if we're no good to ourselves, right? So we have to make sure that we prioritize on checking in with ourselves, carving out time to do the things that make us happy and fulfilled. And also, if we should have an outlet, because some therapists, most therapists that I know, actually they have a therapist too. So the therapist has a therapist, and so that should tell us, well, okay, I'm here helping, and I'm in the community, and I'm doing X, Y, and Z, but I need to make sure that I'm helping myself as well. And it can be easier said than done, but it can be done, and that's a personal priority that you'll have to make with yourself. And just tapping into the next comment about sometimes having multiple therapists. I've been there and done that. And listen, no one therapist, you may not, if you're lucky, like it's the best thing if you have a therapist and you go and you're like, oh my God, this is the one. Kudos to you. But it can take multiple tries, and that's okay, because everybody's different, and how you connect with your therapist is definitely important, because you want to be able to be open and honest, and you don't want to feel pressured, and you don't want to feel judged. And if you feel that way with a therapist, then that's a red light. Just to say, like, okay, I need to go, let me exit, right? I had an incident like that where a therapist told me, oh wow, I would have never, I shared something with her, and she said to me, oh wow, you look so well put together and everything is perfect in your life. And that was like, what? I was like, wait a minute, that just rubbed me the wrong way, and I definitely cut ties, because she was being judgmental. And so, even though I am what you see, it doesn't mean I have to give you everything, right? And so, if I'm coming to a therapist, this is supposed to be a safe space. This is supposed to be me unpacking things, you helping me to unpack things, and really just get to the root of whatever's bothering me, or helping me learn to cope, right? So when you hear certain things and it makes you feel uneasy or makes you uncomfortable, that is your cue to politely bow out and continue your search. And even if it gets a little challenging, don't be discouraged, because you're gonna find your perfect. And I don't, not even perfect, but you're gonna find the right connection, and you're gonna be so happy with that. But you don't know unless you give it a try. But don't get discouraged and say, you know what, it's too hard, or it's too many of them and they're not getting me. You're gonna find your match.
You know, when I read Akua Bisa's statement in the chat, it made me think about preparation. and how, we prepare, if you are expecting, you need an OBGYN. If you have children, you assume you're going to have a pediatrician in your phone. I was going to say in your Rolodex. Those don't exist. But in your phone, I know, I don't know why that came to mind. We don't prepare for the necessity of having like mental health care practitioners that we're familiar with, and because we don't necessarily always have the conversation the way it's being had here today. Anushka, your people may know, because of your openness, right? That, okay, well, Anushka, this was her experience, so I know I can go to her. But many of us do not. We don't share that, we're seeking or have sought out mental health care, or even spiritual supports, because it doesn't have to be a practitioner in the sense of, I'm going to a psychologist or a social worker, or to, a clinical therapist in that sense. It could be, supports through pastoral services, right? But what's important is that you're prepared in advance, because as Akua stated in the chat, it can be very difficult, not just to find the right therapist, but to come up with the right treatment plan. And so the more we talk about this, the willfully, the more each of us become, prepared and aware of the need to have resources on hand, because I may not need them, but what if someone else needs them? At least if they reach out to me, they know, okay, this is what I have that could be a support for you. And I would say for those of us that are in the mental health care field, that's what we become. We become that phone call when the breakdown is actively happening, or when loved ones or friends of and their loved ones are actively experiencing a break. And that can be a really challenging time to have to navigate healthcare forms and referrals, and all of the medical, the formal process of it all. So just something for us to think about, connected to this topic.
That's right. Oh, I just wanted to say, Precious, I agree with the being prepared, because what I started noticing was that my friends and family would contact me. So I kept a running list. And the physicians that I do know, or the ones that I have experience with, or that I know folks who have, I keep them in my phone. So when someone asks me, well, I need, such and such kind of doctor, I have it to go to, because it's just like, like I said, the older we get, I think the wiser we become. And so mental health kind of eases up, at least the people that I'm engaging with, right? But then also, what I have challenges with now is when my male friends are asking me, I need a mental health, or a therapist or a counselor, but they have to be, a person of color and male. That's where the challenge becomes a little bit more, right? Because they're not many. There are some, and I have one go-to person that I always go that I send folks to all the time, and I'm like, I know you're tired of me, but you're the person, right? But now he works with veterans specifically, so it's like, you know, but there are definitely ways, and if we stay prepared for ourselves and our loved ones in our community, it's, each one helps, one person helps another, and it can just be a trickle down effect.
Yeah, I think that key word was community, because it's so important, and especially as you talked about, like, it's hard to find basically someone who is melanin dominant and male, right? So it speaks to the importance of having brotherhood and sisterhood and community where you can go and be in that safe space. Even that in and of itself is toward that prepping, that being prepared that you talked about earlier, Precious. That's even being prepared. It's like, what and who am I surrounding myself by, so that I know that that my mind is safe, and that it can evolve as it needs to, and not just like go down into the depths of who knows where. So it's important to be surrounded by people because it's the part of overcoming, right? If you're at that stage where you have to overcome, having whether they be blood relatives or family that you have created from finding people who are like you, your A-likes, whether it be those people through blood or otherwise, it's important to have that safe haven available to you. I want to say Akua Visa. Oh, you're welcome. She's you're welcome for the shout out. Rolodex, huh? I mean, technically, the phone can be like it's your digital Rolodex. I think people still say, well, you just use your finger. You're still using it because before you used to flip. You just use one finger now and it scrolls up. It's still a scrolling. She says, right, Ema Precious, there are other avenues of support aside therapists. I've never thought of preparing to have support. Good mention. Yeah, it's important. And we know that our people, and I'll say melanin dominant people, and I'm not excluding myself from this conversation, we don't prepare. We don't prepare. We have to do better at preparing because this is getting ridiculous. It's getting out of hand. Many of the shows when we're talking about like a lot of the public health issues that we cover, a lot of it is because we're not preparing. When we're talking about food, we're talking about clothing and shelter. A lot of it is because we don't prepare. And that's just a raw truth that needs to be said. We have to prepare. So that was, really key that you mentioned that.
Yeah, we don't, sorry. So we don't prepare in many instances, but particularly, when it comes to mental health and the stigma therein, there's almost like, not almost, it's not just a lack of preparedness, it's a lack of even wanting to acknowledge, because the mark of it is so unattractive still, even though many of us experience some sort of mental infirmity, right, at a time in our lives. And it could be something as organic as, experiencing a challenging time, a challenging cycle in life, experiencing a loss, going through, as Akua touched on in the chat, being a healthcare worker and going through COVID. There are certain things that I could share here all day with the two of you about leading a hospital during the time of COVID that only other healthcare providers, or and dare I say some of the information only leaders could relate to, that are indelibly marked on me, I'll share one, not knowing that if your patient expired, that there was room in the morgue at the at the local hospital because they were inundated, and being told, well, we'll be sending freezer trucks for you to keep on the grounds. It's like, wait, what am I supposed to do with the freezer trucks? Oh boy, this is how bad it may get. Like, those sort of things are, yeah, you need to talk about them. And much more the healthcare workers, like the frontline nursing staff and housekeeping staff and dietary staff and all of those ancillary providers. So while we don't prepare in many instances with mental health in particular, there's almost like throwing a blind eye. And that's the part that we often have to push past. Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a reality that many of us like have not had a chance to experience. Like, all of our experiences during COVID were different and to varying degrees. So like for me, I don't know how I would be able to deal with like freezer trucks being brought and then knowing like what goes inside, and I have to be the one to make the decision to how to utilize them, and also being mindful of the team that's under me and how they're faring with having to utilize them as well. you know. So yeah, I totally agree. Akua says, now that I think about it, in our battle plans, it does ask who is our support. So in our community, in our new, we do battle plans for the year. And it's literally like your strategy, like how am I going to punch this year in the face and come out shining on the other side? And part of that is like, listing like all the things that you want to accomplish within reason. You're not going to make yourself like wear yourself out and then definitely absolutely need to have speak to someone and lay on the couch, but definitely like within reason. And it does what's your support? And right now, like, we're going through task exercises, like who can you delegate things to, thinking about like mental health and like kind of protecting that mental space. It's like, how much are we taking on? Are we taking on too much to the point to where we get overwhelmed? So what can be delegated? What can you kind of share? How can you share the workload to lessen the mental load, right? So yeah, that's what we do. And that's the importance of the battle plan. Yeah, it's Master Mental, like freezer trucks. Yeah, it was a thing in New York City, like the freezer trucks. Yeah, interesting. Yes, to talk about constant code blues in the hospital, just send me. Right, Akua, you were in the hospital as well. So like I can only imagine what that's like. So I want to go into overcoming, as we, start to wrap it up, and we can like, wrap it up on overcoming, like, and what some ways are. And we've pretty much touched on them, and the first one was like, making sure you have that community. It's just like, don't isolate, prepare and have that community around you. So if you find yourself in that way where you need emotional support or support for a mental or social and behavioral disorder that you may have, you are fully equipped to deal with it because you have people around you who are also equipped and also don't have that ignorance. There's not that negative attitudes or discrimination, which are all the things that contribute to stigma, that social stigma, and also to self-stigma, where you internalize and become the disease. And I'll open it up to the floor, like, what are some other things? And also share in the chat, what are some other things that people can do to overcome?
I'll jump in really quickly. So a piece of overcoming is acknowledging some of the preventative measures, right? In some instances, these may be corrective measures because you didn't use them to prevent. But I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the, putting a lid on environmental pollutants as best you can. But definitely the pollutants that you place in your body by way of your diet and nutrition, because that you can control, or even the chemicals that we use to clean our homes and clean our foods. We often don't make an association between those things. I mean, we should with the food, right? But we may not with the toxins that are in the lotions and the soaps and the detergents that we use in our home. But they have the potential to make a huge impact the in your body, right? On your hormones and how in your ability to process and even stave off infection, right? So that's another piece of overcoming that I don't want us to lose sight of. Because we don't, especially when it comes to mental health. Now, if you had some sort of physical ailment, or what we call, behavioral health care versus acute care, you may look at, oh yeah, let me change my eating, but you may not associate it with mental health. You may only think that your option is a therapist and psychopharm, which are, prescription mental health drugs. But that's not necessarily the case. Or it can be used to balance, to help balance you. So yeah.
You know what? Right. Right. How does sovereignty? This is true. This is true. This is true. And go visit Sovereignty's channel. She has a video talking about that gut brain connection, because I wanted to connect it back to the food, and people not realizing like it's a real thing, because especially when it comes to sugar. Sugar is more addictive than crack. It is addictive. And it really is one of those substances that is a really good study when it comes to the gut brain connection. It's like once it's there, then there's like bacterium in your stomach from the things that you eat that send signals to your brain and say, I want more. I want more. I'll give you an example. Like, I remember when I was younger, my parents and the adults in my family would always be like, have water while you're eating food, or drink, whatever drink it's going to be. If it's not water, drink it afterwards, because you'll be drinking all through the meal and then you won't leave room for the food. In addition to that, it's like the more sugary drinks you want, you're going to want more. And I remember learning that from way back. Like, you're going to drink that Kool-Aid, you're going to want more. Have this water in between, or you have one cup and then everything else is water after that. Because there is that instinct, like, no, there's something off with this, like, and I'll say refined sugar, because there are things that we can get natural sugar in, and are totally fine. Dates are a really good substitute, for things that are sugary. They are very sweet and it's natural. Fruit has its own sugar, but I think that was key to mention, because the gut brain connection is real. So like I said, I'll also put Sovereignty's information in the chat as well, and you can learn that. So again, visit us on YouTube and you'll be able to find all that information.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I see also in the chat too, like someone says, proper rest is important, definitely. And having, the work-life balance, I think is just a life balance. And then for us, I'm one of those people that work from home. And trust me, I have to have very strong boundaries with that, because there's times I found myself at this computer, all three screens, for too many hours. And I'm just like, okay, no, I haven't even gone outside. So, yes, you have to have a healthy boundary between work time and when it's time to rest and take care of self. And, if you have a family, and do the things that really make you happy. And so, really, it brings us back to what's most important to us, right? And I think overcoming and touching on the things that'll help us overcome. So, of course, yes, if you have a community of people to talk to, that's amazing. But we all know not everybody has community, and it can be a little difficult to engage with folks, right? So I think the best thing we can do for ourselves is start with self, right? Start with self-love and self-care. Do the little things that makes you happy, and that's going to help kind of balance out the pressures or the worry. Eating healthier, making healthier eating choices is definitely one of them. Like Precious said, we have to be mindful of what we're taking in, because some things, if you really notice and you want to be intentional about it, as you're eating, see how you feel after you eat. How does it make you feel? Are you down and sluggish, like if you eat a big old steak and whatnot, or if you have fruits, and you know what I mean? What time of day are you eating things, and exactly, organic, not organic, whatever the case may be. But I think a lot of this overcoming has to be intentional. You have to want it for yourself, and then by wanting it, you're being mindful and being wise about your choices. I'm gonna go for this stroll. Okay, it's raining outside, I can't go for a walk outdoors, but I'll get on this treadmill. If I don't have a treadmill, I'm gonna stand in my house and just walk. So there's ways to do things, and alternatives, but we really have to get back to the center of us, what we want in short-term goals and long-term goals. Eating better, making healthier eating choices, making sure there's movement, daily movement in our lives, and then also taking some rest time. Rather, you're getting a full 8 hours of sleep, or if you're meditating or you're breathing helps. It helps the nerves, just like best practices with that. Doing Zumba, whatever the case may be. Those are small things that people sometimes they overlook that, but it makes a world of a difference in your overall well-being. And then when you do that and you're comfortable, then you can go ahead and do all the other things too. So if you can't immediately find a therapist, and if a therapist is not the route you want to go, spiritually is big too. What I do sometimes when I don't want to talk to anyone, I go by the water. For some reason, I love the ocean. It makes me calm. That wind does something to me. And I just sit. I sit still and I breathe and I talk to God. I write. If I want to journal something, I'll journal. If I just want to do any like little practices that make me happy, I do that, and it helps. And then it brings clarity as well. So we all have different things. It's just a matter of pinpointing what it is and incorporating it in our day to day, or making time for it, because that's what's going to help us overall.
You know, while you were sharing, Anushka, another strategy that came to mind is a bit more self-awareness, and that's always a challenging one. I find, I don't know, maybe everybody else has it like down, but being able to identify your triggers, like even if it means dialing it back a little bit, like pulling that thread, how did I get here? Because sometimes it's a culmination of things that lead up to mental fatigue, right? Because I know when we say mental health awareness, the mind often goes to the most chronic mental illnesses, right? That there are, but there's such a vast difference between just mental fatigue and schizophrenia, right? Very, very different, very, very different. But many of us don't have that predisposition or won't experience that sort of mental break, but you will experience mental fatigue in many instances. So being able to understand how you're packing things in to your head, your thoughts, your mind, your body, right? We spoke about the food, and how you can kind of decompress and unpack. So I like a lot of the tools that you identified, Anushka. So just that idea of awareness came to mind. I think you touched on writing things, but yeah, journaling for sure. And somehow, something that I've been exploring lately is yoga nidra. If you don't know about yoga nidra, it is great. So, yeah, it's like sleep yoga, but it's so much more than just sleep yoga. Like it's so much more than someone saying mantras or saying, calming, soothing words to lull you into a restful state. It can also be used to listen to affirming words, even to help you get over some of the like sugar addiction. It can be used in so many ways. So I encourage you, if you're interested, whomever you are might be, to look into yoga nidra and all of its uses and practices beyond just lulling you into sleep. But yeah, I'm happy I was able to hop on in. This was a really good discussion.
Yeah. You also mentioned, like, talk to God, right? And I think that is so key. Like, I I have had to, and this was not even on my own, right? Because I, like, and I did share, like, we talked about, we all may go through cycles where we have to address the mental, and like the transition of a parent can be that. And so I was definitely there and still am in some cases, in some days. And I was, guidance and instruction was given to me, like, talk with God, commune with God, read scripture, and meditate. And so those are the things that I've been doing. You talked about meditation. I'm like, listen, I had to like put on the schedule for an hour. There's an hour blocked meditation. And I'm not just like sitting there. Sometimes I just go on outside and stand in the sun. I'm just like roaming around the house. I'm just not focused on any of the external outside noise. I'm just like standing in the sun in silence, and it has helped. I have done like the yoga, like take like 20 minutes in the day. I'm just gonna do this yoga. And it's amazing because I think not only is it good for the body, and as Honor Radio says, like having engaging movement plan is key. It's not only good for the body, but it's good for that spiritual, to like just take minutes, take some time for yourself and move the body. Because as you said, we're just sitting here. I know the three screens all too well, and going forth and forth, back and forth between this screen and that screen. And then I have two other screens on standby just in case one dies or something's acting crazy and I gotta go somewhere else. So yeah, like totally understand. Like, and it's good to just like push all the noise out and do do for self. So I think that's, key. And I did want to bless and love peace, Brother Cruz. Peace, peace, peace. Alevarares. Peace. I wanted to also share, you're right. Some people don't have community. And so I do want to share on here, you know, it's important to look for community, especially like righteous community that, can uplift you, and not just like people who are just like, we just here together and we just gonna commiserate on our misery and just keep doing the same things. You want to evolve. And so I will say, like, Anu Life Global Ministries is a great place to do that. You can visit the website at www.anulifeglobal.org. And that is a community. That's a community that I'm a part of. And we definitely, focus on elements of living and the way that we live our lives, scripture, based on scriptural text, to move past those, as I mentioned earlier, those mental meanderings that we let in the way, so that we can be prepared for dealing with mental health and not have to deal with the mental health stigma that comes along with it. So thank you so much, Anushka and Precious, for mentioning those things. And I'll also put all that information will be in the chat. So if you want to see it, you want to figure out where it is, go visit the chat, like, share, and subscribe. Yes, remove yourself. Akua Visa says, remove yourself from the environment. Is money or peace of mind most important? Right. And I think it's peace of mind. It is. Yeah.
And with that, what you'll find is when you follow that peace of mind, everything else comes together perfectly. Because it's connected more so to purpose, right? Because and we've spoken about this before, when we're moving on purpose, you're following, right? Or you're adhering to the mind of the Most High, your Creator. And so it's like, how would things not come together? So yeah, definitely.
And one quick thing too, with peace of mind, the more peace of mind you have, the stronger you are, the stronger willpower you have. So if someone comes poking at you and trying to disrupt that peace, you're like, wait a minute, no, because you know what it feels like now, right? It's been an everyday thing. It's like you've done the work and you've been intentional. And so when the outside things come in trying to poke and disrupt it, you're like, no, I'm not having it. And so that self-awareness is there, right? That's part of that self-care and self-love. So yes, to peace of mind, 1,000%.
Yep. And I think that's enough said. Enough said. So yeah, so today was the truth about mental health stigma. So we have taken this conversation up, down, sideways, around and back. And we'll probably be back here again because we're going to talk about a lot of things this season. This is only episode 2. So episode 3, you spoke of yoga. So I will that everyone joins us for episode 3, because we're going to have a guest join us, Fruits of Life Yoga. You can follow her on Instagram, and she is a yogi, a mom, and she's gonna, come and talk about her experience and like what she does in comedic yoga. So I think there'll be so much information, so much to talk about, since we also have our own personal resident yogi in the mix. So yeah, so I'm trying to figure out if we should do like some live yoga, but we'll confer about that behind the scenes and see if that makes sense. So definitely join us. In 2 weeks. We're going to be on Thursday, June 23rd, and we'll be here live with Roots of Life Yoga, episode 3, which is our Mind, Body, Soul series, and we're talking about the body, yoga bodies. So peace, everyone. Thank you for joining us at True Health Live, and we'll see you in the forward.
Peace.